Delayed, revamped, and reimagined. Those three words best describe the chaos that has been the Skull and Bones development process. Hey there friends, it's Kodiak here. Welcome back to Legacy Gaming. Today, Ubisoft is firing a shot across the bow with the huge re-reveal of their long-awaited pirate game, Skull and Bones. Let's call a spade a spade. Skull and Bones at one time was a game that had the industry buzzing. The idea of a pirate-themed naval combat game with open-world components was a pretty fresh concept. Problem is, that was 5 years ago, even longer if you trace things all the way back to the Black Flag days. For those that don't remember, Skull and Bones was first revealed to the masses at E3 2017, but has actually been in the works since 2013. Talk about a lifetime ago. As with most cinematic reveals, we didn't learn much at the time, only that Ubisoft Singapore was developing the game and that it somehow involved pirates, ships, and a whole lot of fighting on those ships. The troubled past of Skull and Bones isn't something we can ignore, and while a re-reveal and release date announcement is something to get excited about, it's hard to forget the bumpy road that brought us to this point in time. Articles dating back years have detailed the game's turbulent development, from managers redesigning the game from the ground up to turnover rates so high the team was comprised of mostly junior staffers. It's a small miracle this game wasn't shelved. Now, one report from The Gamer dating back to 2021 explains that a deal with the Singaporean government may be the reason the project is still afloat, but for now at least, we can turn the page and focus on what Skull and Bones is now, in its current state. For those that don't know me, I believe in cautious optimism when it comes to new game releases, but with Skull and Bones, I have to say the caution far outweighs the optimism. We know Ubisoft is capable of making solid games, but Skull and Bones has been through the ringer, and at this point, it's still way too early to tell if the game will be a success, and more importantly, any fun. So to get into it, we've finally seen Skull and Bones, the real Skull and Bones, not just some cinematic hype reel. So what is it? Well, to be perfectly honest, I don't think it fits squarely into a specific genre. But I will say, from what I've seen, there are elements of open world, survival, and RPG games all kind of folded together to create something a bit different and new. Sure, there are clear parallels to Assassin's Creed Black Flag, but that's where this project started, so for things to still be within that same track is kind of amazing if you think about it, nearly 10 years later. Now, without burying the lead, yes, Skull and Bones has a release date, November 8th, 2022. At its core, Skull and Bones is a naval combat game where you play as a pirate captain looking to make your way in a world that doesn't even want you on it. You'll start with next to nothing, a small ship called the Dhow that's barely capable of staying afloat, let alone fending off an armada. This is where the survival aspects of the game start to bleed in against the RPG elements. The goal is to raise your infamy by completing contracts and progressing through the pirate ranks, a pretty classic RPG-esque system. You'll have missions to overcome and wildlife to farm so that you can prepare for whatever comes next, whether that be bigger ships, more crew members, or fending off an assault from an enemy. The bigger your ship, the more you'll need to maintain it, keeping it stocked up with food to prevent a mutiny, and ship parts to keep yourself afloat. What I'm really glad the devs are bringing to the table is a true multiplayer experience. They made a point to say and show off this aspect of the game. You can play Skull and Bones alone, and that's great, but it's pretty clear that the experience is best suited for multiple players, with PvP combat and a big social world for all those players to explore. We don't know the inner workings of everything quite yet, but we know enough to get the ball rolling. As a duo that spent a decent amount of time with Sea of Thieves and even smaller games like Blazing Sails, we can say with full confidence the PvP action, at least for a little while, should be invigorating. Now, unlike those games, you are the captain of your own ship, and your friends, well, they're the captain of their ship. So don't really expect to hop around, snipe people from crow's nests, and swim back plunder that you get from your enemies. That's not really what Skull and Bones is presenting. Again, at its core, it's a naval combat game. You'll spend time outfitting your vessel with weaponry in the front, left, right sides, and back, and cover the entire thing with armor that allows you to absorb more damage from specific weaponry. From everything that we saw here, there are plenty of interesting options like flamethrowers, mortar platforms, rockets, and even an interesting border mechanic that got me pretty excited, I'm not gonna lie. With so much firepower, you'd expect combat to happen from a distance, that'd be a safe bet. But to really reap the benefits of a fight, you're going to have to close the gap and take over an enemy's ship. Now again, the boarding mechanic is all automated from what we can tell, and I'm not entirely sure what the conditions are that dictate a successful board or not. But what we do know is that boarding and plundering a ship is far more lucrative than just simply blowing it up and scavenging the remains. If I'm being honest, that's a small bit of realism that I actually quite enjoy. Tapping into their roots, Ubisoft did reveal that players will be able to dock at ports and venture around pirate dens, in what I have no doubt will feel like playing an Assassin's Creed game. It's that third-person RPG vibe that is just so familiar to me after creating hundreds of videos for Valhalla. So what do we actually do at these ports? A lot of what you'd expect. Buy and craft upgrades for your ships, accept contracts or missions, purchase items from black market vendors, and customize your captain with different cosmetics. Honestly, if you think Ubisoft is going to reinvent the wheel here, you're kind of crazy. But that doesn't mean the experience looks bad. And in fact, gut reaction, I'm intrigued. There are some interesting things about the game that I'm still not quite sure about, specifically the ability to harvest raw materials like wood and ore from your boat. That one's a bit of a stretch for me and strange to say the least, and feels like a way to shoehorn crafting into the experience. But other things, like throwing spears at hippos and crocs that are trying to broadside you, yeah, I can get behind that one. There are some other systems within the game players might find familiar, albeit not in this particular setting. One is some sort of notoriety, which, as you might expect, if you've ever played a GTA game, is something that raises over time the more heinous your acts become on the open ocean. In this case, the policing faction, the DMC, which I believe stands for the Dutch Merchant Company, patrols the seas and guards the merchant vessels using the waterways to move goods. Piss them off too much and they'll start hunting you down. The devs even made a note of an elite faction of AI-controlled ships that'll hunt you down mercilessly if you pull off enough evil deeds. Now, speaking of evil, I want to touch on the mutiny system I mentioned before. A really interesting aspect of the game I hope plays out in a smart way. Keeping your crew happy seems to be dependent on a few things, like how much food you have on board, how much damage they're doing to other ships, and how much plunder that they're scoring. Things of that nature. If these things shift out of balance, your crew will turn on you and mutiny. Great concept, but still very little idea how it actually plays out. Do you lose your ship? Do you lose your crew? Do you start back at square one? I really have no idea, but I do know Ubisoft, and my guess is that you're not going to lose everything. Now, to me, this feels like a small X factor, something new and different that could add another layer of depth to the experience if done correctly. And oh yeah, for those of you that like cute furry things, there are pets like cats and lemurs that hang out right next to your steering wheel. So here's the rub. What remains to be seen at this point about Skull and Bones is if the game manages to tie all of those different systems together to create a cohesive experience. And does it all feel seamless? Does outfitting a ship flow smoothly into heading out into open water? Does the combat feel intuitive and satisfying? How does the PvE and PvP fit into the equation? And how does everything else, the expeditions, investigations, fort assaults, crafting, customization, everything they're promising, work to enhance the experience? We've seen a fair chunk of the game and gameplay, so good on Ubi for doing that one, because another cinematic trailer at this point just wouldn't have cut it. But was the gameplay enough to sell you? Now, I didn't want to go in depth in our first video. We'll have plenty of time to talk about Skull and Bones very soon. I don't know if you've looked around, but gaming right now, kinda dead. So keep it right here on the channel if you're interested in more piratey goodness, as well as a ton of other content we have planned for the second half of the year. Of course, you can also join our great community on Discord, 20,000 plus members with channels for all different types of games our community members love. Check out that link below and join up today. If you like the channel and you want to support us even more, consider becoming a member. For just a few bucks, you're helping Livid and I achieve our dreams of becoming full-time content creators. Check out that join button below to learn more. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.